Hi, this is Mary Baca with Remotely Unique, coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the show today is called Self-Sabotage and Shame, the Toxic Relationship. Shame is an area that I have been talking about for, so many years now, probably 20 years. And this is going to be a two-part series on April 26th and then May 3rd. Continuing on May 3rd. So first of all, let's look at what self-sabotage is, and which is it's active or passively taking steps to prevent ourselves from reaching goals. Like nobody sets out consciously with the intention to sabotage themselves. That's the hard part, is that most often it is a very subconscious pattern that ties into belief systems and limiting beliefs and things like that I'm going to talk about. So that's the difficult part is, if we engage in a behavior that's a conscious behavior, it's much easier to change, right? But when we have behaviors go on that are subconscious, it makes it more difficult. And in doing research for some of the trainings I do, I once read that 86% of our behavior is due to subconscious beliefs and patterns in our psyche. And I really, really believe that to be fact. So the thing with self-sabotage is that it plays out in so many aspects of our life, really almost every aspect of our life. It'll play out in the relationship aspect of our lives, both romantic and just other kinds of relationships like at work and friendships and parent-child and things like that. It'll play out in our career, or either sabotaging our goals that we have, or even personal goals such as weight loss. And I really want to tell you, if you're not living the best life today that you possibly could, and you're not just having your dreams come true right and left, there's a good chance that you are self-sabotaging. I know that may sound like, a really huge thing, but it is. Actually, self-sabotage is a very powerful dynamic that happens. And it tends to create a vicious cycle, meaning that a person might start off with a limiting belief of they're not good enough, and then they engage in a self-sabotaging behavior, like maybe running late to a meeting and then getting fired or written up or reprimanded for running late to too many meetings. And then that leads to that vicious circle of, I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. So it really is kind of something that breeds upon itself in that way. You start off with, say, a limiting belief, and then that turns into self-sabotaging behavior, and then that cycles back through with proving, quote unquote, right to the person that they really aren't good enough. The thing, too, is that with self-sabotage, there is a multitude of ways that people sabotage themselves. Sometimes they may engage in substance abuse. They may turn to food. So say somebody that's trying to lose weight may, in their self-sabotaging cycle, they may turn to food and sabotage any success that they can have in that area, for example. Procrastination is another way that people self-sabotage. Being a poor friend to somebody when maybe you really do want connection with people. And the reason why these things occur, if they occur consistently in your life, is typically because there are deeper seated patterns and issues that are going on. And it's usually pretty hard for somebody alone to identify what the causal factors are, what makes a person do these behaviors. So that's where sometimes like it helps to talk to a counselor or to a spiritual person or a religious pastor or even a coach, a life coach can be helpful in identifying these patterns and looking at where they started out to begin with, right? So the very reason why we make some of the decisions that we do can in themselves alone prevent us from reaching our goals. And that goes back to what I said. If you're not just slaying your dreams, and having all your life dreams come true right and left, then it could be because of self-sabotaging. And I mean dreams that are just yourself. If some of your dreams involve another person, you can't control another person. So say you really want a relationship to work and it's failing. Well, there's 2 or more people involved in that situation. So, you can only take care of your end of things. And that might not be a question of self-sabotaging unless actually, like staying in the relationship may be sabotaging you and preventing you from having the dynamic, loving, amazing relationship that you deserve, right? We're also going to talk in this podcast today about ways to change it, but we have to be able to understand what self-sabotage is first in order to get there. So one of the things involved in self-sabotage is if you lack self-worth. And as a holistic practitioner, one of the areas of the body or the energy system that I work on that has to do with self-sabotage is the solar plexus chakra. Some of you are going to know what chakras are. Some of you will listen to this podcast and not ever have even heard of chakras. But chakras are the energy system in our body. And the solar plexus chakra has to do with self-confidence and things like that. So if you have a pattern going on in your psyche, in your belief system, that you are not worthy enough to have good things happen in your life, then that's one area of your body that is going to be affected. And I think rather than try to describe where that is, I'll post a picture on the remotely-unique website of the chakra system, and that way you can know exactly where I'm talking about. But anyways, when you have these belief systems go on, it affects you mentally, physically, and emotionally. We are one system. We're not broken up into parts. And so what affects your body is going to affect your mind. What affects your mind is going to affect you emotionally. It all just goes hand in hand together. And so if you have a belief system that believes you're not worth good things, and if you think this isn't you, just try to look yourself in the mirror and make this statement: I deserve good things in life. I am enough. In fact, I am so awesome and amazing. And if you can look yourself in the mirror and really feel those things, then you're probably on good standing and probably don't do much, if any, self-sabotage. That's always a kicker, right? Is looking yourself in the mirror. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people that cannot look at themselves in the mirror. In fact, really up until, I don't know how many years that I've been doing work on myself, many, many years, probably like 20, been to therapy and spiritual advisors, and I have a spiritual mentor, in fact, that I meet with once a month. But, up until probably the last 4 years, I couldn't look myself in the mirror and say those things. So trust me, I know how that goes. But just try that little exercise. If you think that this stuff doesn't pertain to you, just try that, and that will be proof in the pudding, so to speak. The hard thing is, if you come from a belief system that you're not worth good things, I don't know how many of you have heard of self-fulfilling prophecy, but self-fulfilling prophecy means that you're going to act in ways and show up or not show up in ways where you're going to prove that to be true. Again, going back to the original example I used at the beginning, somebody who sabotages by showing up consistently late to meetings. If you trace that back, oftentimes you'll find a belief system like that, like, I don't deserve good things. And then you end up with a behavior that goes in line with that. And really then you're dealing with, that person is dealing with them being the block or stopping themselves from achieving their fullest potential. And that's what we should all strive for, right? To be happy and reach our fullest potential. I'm telling you, it is possible for everyone. And the other thing to ask that I would ask as a coach, as a life coach, or as a counselor, I would ask, who has sold you that pack of lies? Who in your lifetime has sold you that story, whether it was said directly or indirectly, that you're not worth good things? The hard thing is if we hear that enough, as children, we begin to tell ourselves that. And as we tell ourselves that and turn into that inner critic that a lot of people have, then at some point you start to believe it. The other thing that comes into play here is the fear of success. And you might sit there saying, who's afraid of succeeding? Like, that's just crazy, Mary Baca. But trust me, it is not. And a lot of times what goes hand in hand is fear of failure and fear of success. Often, a success for a person is foreign. They're not used to succeeding, or they're not used to getting praise as children that they are successful. And when you're a kid, that happens in very low-level, simple kinds of things. Even as simple as drawing a picture for your mom, for example, that you pour all your energy into, and you want her to like it, and you go to give it to her, and she either doesn't pay attention, doesn't stop what she's doing, or says something like, oh, that's nice, and keeps on going about life, making dinner or whatever, as opposed to stopping what she's doing, takes like just a few seconds, and saying, oh my gosh, that picture is so amazing. Thank you so much. You just made my day. And when you do things like that with a child, you are able to see their little faces just light up, right? Because children, they are that fragile and dependent and vulnerable on looking to validation externally from people in their environment, and especially their caretakers and their parents, is looking for that validation that they are just awesome little human beings. And when a child doesn't get that, and they don't get praised for being quote unquote successful, then a lot of times that then starts the ball in motion to develop some of these limiting beliefs and these patterns. So that's an example of how that starts, right? And then that just carries into adolescence and then adulthood of being afraid to try things, being afraid to fail, but then also being afraid to succeed. I often think about like famous people, they must really have it hard, like when they succeed, maybe they cut an album and it is just spectacular. I often wonder, how do they then, deal with the pressure of continuing from that? Because, once you just, make number one on all the charts, how I just oftentimes think it must be really stressful for them to try to keep doing the same thing. But going back to that child that doesn't get the praise and the validation, then they're just going to grow up repeating those same patterns, possibly causing those same reactions or lack of responses from people, and to where success is a very foreign feeling. And so a lot of times I have seen individuals really sabotage their potential success because of that kind of thing, because it's unfamiliar. It's more familiar to fail for a lot of people. Doesn't mean they like it. I'm not saying that at all. It's very painful for people when they fail or they feel they have failed. But those can be like old shoes, right, that are so comfortable and so familiar that changing those shoes can be really intimidating and actually even scary. So that's typically how that can go. One of the other things that happens is when people have a hard time taking responsibility. So, and we're going to talk more about shame next week, but when people have shame as a basis, sometimes they just are so brutal on themselves that they'll blame themselves and, really just hold things against themselves for not succeeding at whatever, even little task that they're wanting to do. Or they go to the other extreme where everybody else is at fault. And the more that a person has these issues that we're talking about, which is shame, the more this is true and plays out. So how that can play out, one of the ways is to find everyone else at fault and believing that, I didn't do it. I didn't get that promotion because my boss doesn't like me. I have to change jobs because all my coworkers hate me. Well, when you hear this from a person over and over and over in different areas of their life and different settings and from different people, you begin to get the picture that, okay, this is a pattern for this person, right? And if that's left unaddressed, then you just have a lifetime of those situations playing out over and over and getting reinforced for the person in their psyche. I want to tell you today that success is for everyone, literally for everyone. You are good enough and more than enough to be successful. And if you feel like you aren't, then you and I got to talk at some point, for sure. And so you'll see people, or I have seen people, set themselves up for failure by just their behavior that comes from their belief system. Behavior doesn't just start with behavior. Behavior starts with our thoughts and feelings. And so if we have thoughts and feelings that are all about not feeling worthy and not being good enough, you will just see that play out in people's behavior. Yes, even the person who's a type A personality and works 90 hours a week has some of these issues. You want to look for extremes. You want to look for the person that is not living their best life and sabotaging themselves, or sabotaging themselves by going way above, over, and beyond to prove something to someone. Sometimes the person or people that they're trying to prove something to isn't even clear of who that even is. So yes, even the doctor that may work 90 hours a week oftentimes has these same issues. And the self-sabotage is them sabotaging having a quality of life, because let's face it, if you're working 90 hours a week, you're not enjoying life. That's just the truth of it, right? The other element that comes into play here is control. That's another area that I'll do a whole show on, is control. And control is an illusion. That's a slogan that I heard a long time ago in Alcoholics Anonymous. No. What's the family one? There you go. Al-Anon. There are a couple of slogans that really made an impression on me. One of them is that control is an illusion, and it absolutely is. We don't have control over anybody but ourselves. And at times we even feel like we don't have control over ourselves. And then the other slogan is that expectations are premeditated resentments. Meaning if we have unrealistic expectations of ourselves or other people, we're just setting that whole situation up to be resentful later. But back to the control thing. If we expect a negative outcome ahead of time to happen, by George, that is probably what is going to happen, because we're going to control things in a way to prove that right, going back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. We, in effect, end up controlling our failure, by doing this. So if we can convince ourselves that, well, it was really our boss's, my boss's fault that I didn't get that promotion, then that's what I mean by controlling what you end up believing to be true. And the hard part is that if you don't deal with reality, then that pattern will just continue and play out over and over and over again. So how do you know if you are self-sabotaging? Well, you should ask yourself some questions. One, are you failing, quote unquote, over and over again, or feeling stuck? And we all go through that. We all go through feeling stuck. That's not the hard part unless you can't get unstuck. If you can't get unstuck, that really is a sign that it would be a good thing for you to talk to a professional who can help you get unstuck. But some of the questions are, am I prioritizing instant gratification? Am I avoiding what needs to be done? Am I not prioritizing self-care? That's a really good one. If you're not practicing self-care, you really need to stop and ask yourself, how do you feel about you? Because that's a really big symptom. And I don't know anybody that's 100%. I don't care if you spend 5 hours a day in the gym and you eat right. I've met people like that do all of that external stuff that seems like, wow, that person really has it together. But when you sit down and talk to them, that could be a whole other thing. I've counseled many bodybuilders and fitness people in my career, and I think I mentioned this on another show, who look picture perfect. I mean, they're flawless, truly. But when you sit down to talk to them, they don't have any more self-esteem than, the prostitute walking down the street, to be honest with you. So you have to be careful not to just go by what's on the exterior and make a judgment about that, meaning that person doesn't have any issues. First of all, we all have issues. I'll tell you that right now. That's just part of being a human being, and how boring life would be if we didn't have issues, right? I think the important part is to always be in motion where you're overcoming things. But you learn a lot about yourself by overcoming things. But don't ever let that be the goal for you to have no issues. One, that's just not realistic. And two, we grow a lot from that. Or there's the opportunity for growth anyways. Another question you want to ask yourself is, am I always procrastinating? When I talk to people about procrastination, and you take that apart, it typically, part of what's involved is the fear of failure or fear of success that happens in there. And it starts in their mind. People are so hard on themselves. You can see somebody that's super successful in societal standards, and in their standard, they don't feel that way at all. So that's always kind of interesting too. And another question is, am I focusing on self-defeating thoughts? Typically, people do not stop and get in touch with what are they thinking. Through the course of getting to know somebody in order to be able to help them, I ask, well, so what are your thoughts like? And it is not uncommon at all for people to have to stop and pause to give me an answer. And a lot of the times, people don't know what they're thinking or feeling, for that matter of fact. And so then we start the work there. I absolutely meet people where they are, and I really try, and I think that I'm good at making people feel like they are worthy of the time that I spend with them, and that they're walking through their journey, and that I'm walking alongside with them, and at times, oftentimes leading them, right? But if you answered yes to any of the questions I just asked, you need to be honest with yourself and think about whether or not this means that you have self-sabotaging behaviors. Now the question is, can we rise above self-sabotaging? Absolutely. Like just being in the healthcare field as a counselor and an energy worker, holistic practitioner, spiritual advisor and mentor, whatever, any of those titles that you want to apply to me. Either way, I absolutely believe in the positive of people and look at my purpose at helping people reach their optimal level of functioning and being their best possible self that they can be, whatever that is for them. And it's such a privilege and an honor, really, to walk with people through their journey and watch that unfold. Is just so rewarding. I cannot even tell you. So how do you rise above it? Well, one of the ways is to get in touch with the limiting beliefs And we're going to get more into that whole area of things when we talk about shame next segment. But to really, that's going to help you really get in touch with what is holding you back. What are some even small things that are holding you back? Like complaining. There are some people, right, that catastrophize and complain, and they just find something to complain about. They find the negative in anything. Well, there's a reason why people are like that. And some people don't want to change that. Some people don't even look at that as a problem. But it is, because negativity is a great self-sabotaging occurrence that will certainly hold you back, for sure. And if you're afraid of failure, you might make a list of the different ways you have succeeded in the past. A lot of times these things live in our mind. And when you start to put things on paper, like kind of be your own devil's advocate and put this on paper of, okay, I feel like a failure. I'll tell people, well, so I want you to make a list of all the different ways you've succeeded. And it's not to make me know how they've succeeded. I can see the success in people or the ability to succeed. It's so that a lot of times in the process of making a list like that, visually a person is able to see, wow, I'm filling up half of this page on ways that I've succeeded. Holy smokes, I never realized that. And so I know a lot of times people are hesitant to put things on paper and write them down or journal and things like that. But that can be a very, very powerful way. And, look for little and big successes. Don't just look for the times you were able to move the mountain. Look at the times that you were able to pick up the pebble, put that aside, move on to the next pebble. Then the pebble became a little bigger of a rock, and then a rock became a boulder, and then eventually there's the mountain that you move, right? Don't just look at the huge things that you think you should be able to accomplish, because to be able to move a mountain, we have to learn those shorter steps first and experience those and praise ourselves along the way. If you don't feel worthy, it may be time to focus on self-care. And that's another area that you can start too. And meet yourself where you're at. You're not going to conquer Rome in a day. I think there's a saying like that. It'll take time, and that's okay. You're worth it. You are worth it. That's what I say. That's what I believe. So if you have any questions about today, or you decide you want to schedule a coaching session with me or a mentoring session with me, feel free to give me a call at 505-315-7397. You can also shoot me a text at that same number, or you can get a hold of me through the website, remotely-unique.com. I have a lot of ways that I can help you clear these limiting beliefs, these self-sabotaging patterns, and shame. Lots of different ways, holistically and traditionally. There's different ways. I have an excellent holistic team and clinical team that are on board to help you too. So let us do so if you feel like you need that. Okay, you have a wonderful day. Make it so. Take care of yourself and each other, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.